What, you have a podcast?
We moved? To where?
The state of Alabama.
Huh?
Alabama!
Are you serious?
Cobb? Yes, sir. You're aware of the name of this ship, aren't you, Mr. Cobb?
Very aware, sir.
It bears a proud name, doesn't it, Mr. Cobb?
Very proud, sir.
It represents fine people
Very fine people, sir.
who live in a fine, outstanding state.
Outstanding, sir.
In the greatest country in the entire world.
In the entire world, sir.
And what is that name, Mr. Cobb?
Alabama, sir.
And what do we say? Go, Bama!
Well, that was some damn fine propaganda.
Clerk will call the roll.
Senator Feinstein.
Say aye.
Pardon me?
Aye.
Yeah.
Just say aye.
I would like to support a yes vote on this. It provides $823 billion. That's an increase of $26 billion for the Department of Defense. And it funds priorities submitted.
Yeah, just say aye.
Okay, just
Great.
aye.
Thank you.
That doll is evil, I tells ya! Evil! Evil!
Grandpa, you said that about all the presents.
I just want attention.
This week has been good bipartisan cooperation and a string of
Okay, Mitch? Anything else you want to say, or should we just go back to your office? Do you want to say anything else to the press? Go back. Go ahead, John. I'll take it.
Oh, yeah. You know, at my age, the mind starts playing tricks. So, death!
Okay.
Senator, you're up for election in 3 short years. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm sorry, I had a hard time hearing you.
That's okay. What are your thoughts on running for re-election in 2026?
What are my thoughts about what?
Running for re-election in 2026.
That's
Did you hear the question, Senator? Running for re-election in 2026?
yes.
All right, I'm sorry, you all. We're going to need a minute. Senator. Benny.
Yep. Head outside, so. Come with us. Okay.
Somebody else have a question? Please speak up.
Coma? Why, I go in and out of comas all the... French toast, please.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Recovery from Politics Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Frame, and today is Thursday, August 31st, 2023. So, we had a little bit of a story yesterday. I honestly had no idea what I was going to talk about today. But then all of a sudden, I look at the news, or actually I was scrolling through social media and everybody's freaking out saying that Mitch McConnell needs health care and it's so great. You know, some people are being ironic and trying to be funny about how he's going to get better health care than all the people he's voted against getting health care his whole life. And isn't it fantastic we live in this? And, you know, I was like, what the hell's going on? Is he in the hospital or something? And no, it turns out he had a second episode where he just... on camera, on stage, whatever, decides to just freeze up. Now, obviously, he doesn't decide this. I'm pretty sure as a politician, that's the last thing he wants in the world is to just freeze right there, especially when being thrown such a softball question. In, you know, the last case, he was being asked specifically how he feels about running 3 years from now in 2026. And at first he couldn't hear the question, and then, you know, it gets repeated a couple times, and then he just kind of goes off. And, you know, he's not the only senator doing this. He's just the most recent. but actually we've had another one, Senator Dianne Feinstein, who has at least been a tad better with her, moments of age showing, I guess, in that her stuff is all happening off camera. So we're getting it from third-hand information, so it's not quite as damaging because it's usually a reporter telling you what happened rather than them having it on video. So the only time you actually got Dianne Feinstein on camera doing something a little silly and goofy was when they were doing the roll call, and all she had to do was say "I," as in present, I'm here. And she didn't. She instead just went off on her tangent, and, the video shows that, an aide had to come over and talk to her and everything. And so Democrats for a while have had this issue. Feinstein's 89. Good old Mitch McConnell's 81. So these people are very old. They're actually very old. They probably shouldn't have been in office quite this long. I'm not entirely sure what Mitch McConnell's going for here at this point, because he's achieved pretty much everything he's going to achieve. I mean, I think even if he gave an honest, objective, view of his career, like, he has wrecked the judicial system exactly how he's always wanted to. He got to see a Republican steal an election. He got to, go through how many impeachments? I think I'm not sure if he was around. I know Lindsey Graham was around for the Clinton impeachment. Not entirely sure about Mitch McConnell. But so he's been around for quite a bit. He's led his party lockstep through this. He has controlled the Senate with an iron fist. And again, he's wrecked the judiciary. He's destroyed liberal agenda entirely. So it's like, at this point, it's like, what do you think you're going to do in the next 2 to 3 years, right? He's in the minority now. If Donald Trump is on the ticket, it's very possible he ends up remaining in the minority past 2024. Because as goes the president, usually goes, the House and Senate. Now, the Senate is very favorable to Republicans, thanks to red states and gerrymandering. So, they are expected to win, but again, if you've got Trump there, what he's going to do is just like last time. They were favored last time, but then he goes ahead and gets Herschel Walker nominated. And the next thing you know, Georgia all of a sudden has 2 Democratic senators, and it's like, where did this come from? And it's all coming from Trump. So you've really got to wonder, he doesn't have control over the nominees. He doesn't have control over the Senate. He might not have control in the future. It's like, at what point does he hanging on? The only thing I can figure, and I thought this was resolved, so I guess I have to do a little research. I was under the impression that Kentucky changed their rules that the state legislature, which is controlled by Republicans, gets to pick his successor if he all of a sudden resigns. I thought that had already happened, because their big worry right now is that, as it stands, there is a Democratic governor of Kentucky, and he would select the next person to fill in till 2026. And of course, this is extremely dangerous because we know more than money, more than anything else, incumbency decides elections. It's very favorable just to already be in office and then run for that office. So it is possible, unlikely, but it is possible that a Democratic governor going ahead and throwing a Democratic senator in to fill in for Mitch McConnell during his last year or two in office could just enough, especially if, somebody like Trump is nominating people again. If he picks somebody super MAGA and super Trumpy, it's possible that Kentucky backfires and all of a sudden you've got a Democratic senator there for 6 years instead of just like 1 or 2. And then, people start calming down a little bit. There is something to be said about, Democrats run the district that I live in. They're not destroying things. I haven't noticed a big difference. Their liberal agenda isn't being crammed down my throat, and it softens it a little bit. You've really got to worry about those areas where the gerrymandering in the state is so red that you have people who have never, ever experienced in their lifetime a Democratic governor or any kind of governance at all from the center left. Because then all they have ever known, the status quo for them has been Republican rule, and, small government, whatever, so they're used to that. And it's very hard to vote for change, believe it or not. So it is possible that the Democrats are sitting here like, come on, Mitch. The one that I don't get, though, and this is the really stupid one for me, is Dianne Feinstein. Okay, Dianne Feinstein is a senator from California. I was born and raised in California. I have hated her since day one. And it's not because of her, I originally hated her just because of all the commercials, all the ads. I'd be sitting there trying to watch my Saturday morning cartoons, and all of a sudden I'm seeing her on my television talking about San Francisco. And I'm like, I could care less. I was in Southern California. I don't care about Northern California. And I especially didn't care about her. And for me, the reason I hate political commercials is pretty much the same reason I almost hate Christmas, is the complete saturation when it's the season, right? When it's a election year, a big election year, especially when the president is lined up, almost every commercial's that way. Everybody's talking about it, and it just becomes this huge thing. And I kind of do the same thing around Christmas. December hits, every television show does a Christmas special, every commercial is a Christmas commercial, and it's just Christmas, 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 Christmas. You go to a store, it's Christmas. Everywhere's Christmas. You can't get away from it. The music starts playing, and it just drives me crazy, and it's that oversaturation, and especially the commercialism about it, that just immediately turns me off. Same thing with politicians. If I keep seeing your commercial, even if I like you, I'm going to start to resent you and hate you, and that's what happened with Senator Feinstein. Way back when, in California, when she was first running for senator, I just hated her because she was constantly interrupting my cartoons. And she obviously had way more money than whoever else was running against her, because all I remember are her commercials, her ads, constantly. And it was a huge turnoff. But the reason I don't understand why she's hanging around is because California is one of the bluest states in the nation outside of New York. So there is a Democratic governor there. She is a Democratic senator. If she up and resigns tomorrow, the governor's just going to appoint a Democrat to take over. And I'm failing to see the problem with this. Like, it doesn't change the Senate. Like, I get Mitch McConnell. Okay, his legacy's secure, but maybe he just doesn't want to give his seat up to a Democrat. I get it. Okay, whatever. I think you're overthinking it. The destruction he's done isn't going to be fixed by Kentucky suddenly being represented by a Democrat. So I don't understand him from that perspective, but at least I get it. Okay, you don't want the numbers to go too far. The Democrats are ineffectual and can't do anything, even with their majority. What's one more vote going to do? Like, if I was Mitch, honestly, I'd be going home. But whatever, he wants to stay because he doesn't want to flip. Feinstein's not going to flip. Feinstein's still going to be a Democrat. So I'm sitting here like, okay, just go. Like, why are you doing this? And there's even a report of like elder abuse going on here because her staffers don't want to get fired, basically. Because obviously, a new senator is going to want to hire their staff. They're going to want to bring in their people. And the old people, if the new senator doesn't agree with them, they're going to get shit canned. And it is entirely possible that it is their staff, or it's her staff, that is just wheeling her out there over and over again, like, hey, I need this job. You can't go anywhere because I'll get fired. And to a degree, that's unfair to them. That is extremely unfair to them. If anything, there should be like a waiting pool somewhere in the Senate, somewhere that, hey, your boss wasn't fired, your boss died, or, they've got dementia, or whatever it is. They're incapacitated in such a way they can't perform their office anymore. It's not fair that because your boss dies, you lose your job. That's very Pharaoh-ish. It's like you're not being buried in their pyramid with them afterwards. Let's not be entombed with them. So it is unfair from a staffer's perception. So I could totally understand, maybe we need to come up with something on the side to guarantee the staffers at least, guarantee their employment as is, at least until the term would have ended. So hypothetically, if she was still, in office for another 2 years, they should have their jobs guaranteed for the next 2 years, barring some, abuse by them kind of a deal, if they're constantly late or whatever kind of a deal. Because I think that would cut back on this. Right now, because right now you've got this 89-year-old woman being wheeled in, and she doesn't even know how to say I. And this is a huge problem for me. I really don't understand it. The only thing that makes sense is the elder abuse side of it, is the, her family and her staff just keep pushing her out there. And it's like, what are you doing? Like this doesn't make sense. Like, a senator of her position, of her prestige, she has a legacy, she has a name. She should be able to go to the governor of California and be like, I have a list of people. Like, here's who I think should succeed me. Are you okay with that? And because he's a Democrat, he should be totally okay with at least looking at the list and being like, yes, there are a few people on here I would consider. I will do this. And then she's like, okay, cool, I'm stepping down. And he picks from that list. Like, I don't see why that isn't happening behind the scenes. So either Gavin Newsom, governor of California, is playing hardball and is like, no, I'll pick who the hell I want. Or there is an election coming up. I think you have Raskin and Katie Porter, who I like, and a few others who are trying to run for Feinstein's seat, because she has already signaled she's not running again. So I don't know if they're just trying to run out the clock and they don't want to put the governor there, or what the governor's plan is. Like, regardless, I think it's at this point, since the president happens to be of the Democratic Party, Biden should be involved in this. Biden should basically go to California, get in a room with the governor in his mansion, get Senator Feinstein or her representative in there, whoever, and just hammer out a deal and get this settled, because at this point, it's kind of halting things. Okay, she missed about 2 months worth of legislation. And unfortunately, the committee that she's on, usually they set up committees unless there's a supermajority like back in 2008. But if it's essentially 50-50 split, give or take a few, the way committees are set up is if you have an 11-person committee, 6 goes to the majority and 5 will go to the minority. Well, that's basically what's happening. She's on these committees that are only, 1 seat shy of everything. So when she's missing, now that committee is essentially a tie, and they can't replace a member on that committee without permission from the Republicans. And I totally get the Republicans playing hardball and are like, screw you, this is your problem, you fix it. And so the only option here is get her out of the Senate entirely so that Chuck Schumer can replace her with somebody else. I don't see why. I don't know what the problem is here. I don't know what the hangup is. Is it her staff is just like, screw you, and doesn't have guarantees? Is it the president is, not willing to step in? This is one of those things where you need a mediator, and that's actually what Biden is very good at, mediating. He's a diplomacy guy. So let's go do that. Let's get him in there, especially since everyone involved is members of the same party. I don't see what the problem is here. Somebody's playing hardball, and I'm not entirely sure who. My only guess, again, goes back to the elder abuse with Feinstein and her staff. So, yeah. But anyway, we're going to take a little break here, and then we'll be back, and I'll tell you my crazy idea for how to solve this problem. So everybody, as we know, the gerontocracy is expanding to meet the needs of the expanding gerontocracy. We have more old people in Congress than ever before. And part of that is, congratulations, you live in the 21st century and our healthcare is fantastic, especially if you are a powerful millionaire backed by billionaires. You get the best healthcare money can buy. You always have food and shelter. You have the best food. You don't eat garbage. You're eating organic, everything, all the time. So, that kind of lies the problem. How do we fix this? Now, Vivek, so smarmy, I don't know, Vivek, yes, he's running for president, and he had this radical idea because he knows that the youth of this country never votes Republican for obvious reasons. His big solution to this is to go ahead and raise the voting age to 25. And if you want to vote between the ages of 18 and 25, you have to pass a civics test. Now, I think the Democrats should go ahead and play. Not necessarily that we're doing anything, but just to kind of push back at this and be like, okay, fine. You want to raise the voting age. Let's lower it. Let's have an upper limit on this sucker, okay? Let's bring it down. Now, me, in my own perfect world where I control everything and I have a magic wand, I would go ahead and say that I want elections where the voters are only between the ages of 25 and 65. Now, younger voters do tend to vote Democratic, and I understand that the left doesn't want to do that. However, come on. I was 18 to 25 once too. I did not know what the hell I was doing, okay? As I said recently to a group of friends who I just met, hi guys, nice to meet you, Alabama. I used to be a Republican. Like, it was very basic. It was very much, I had no idea what was going on. I literally just went to the Republican national website and the Democratic national website, and this was in the late 90s, so they weren't a lot of bells and whistles. But, they had their party platform and what they stood for. And when I read the Republican platform and I read the Democratic platform, I aligned more at the time with the Republican platform. Because the Republican platform mirrored, Eisenhower, Teddy Roosevelt, Lincoln, and their ideals. And I was like, I don't mind those ideals. Those ideals are good in general. If you just ask people what you think about freedom and equality and things of that nature, most people will be like, hell yeah, let's do this, right? And of course, the Democrats don't even mention it because they don't want to mention that they were on the opposite side of Lincoln back in the day. But basically, I always thought, when it comes to the Republican Party, I didn't like match up well with Reagan and Reaganism. I didn't. Bush Sr., Bush Jr., good God, no. None of the Republicans spoke to me at all. There's only been one in my entire life. I've always mentioned that there have only been 2 times I've ever voted Republican in my entire life. One of them is in the very first election the very first election I got to after I turned 18, and that was Arnold Schwarzenegger for governor of California. So if you get past the accent, first off, Arnold is an extremely intelligent person. I think most people hear that accent and they immediately get turned off, and that is not what you want to do with him. He's very smart. Lately, he's been in the news a lot because he promotes right now a whole food plant-based eating system. He's noted that he's still able to pack on the muscle at his advanced age because he's mostly eating beans now instead of meat, and his cholesterol's great, and his doctors love him and all that. And of course, he's also extremely anti-fascist, having grown up in a household with a former Nazi as his dad. He's very open about this. He says the man was broken and beaten, and he's constantly trying to convert the alt-right back to sanity, and is like, look, I've seen this play out, right? This doesn't end well. So he's obviously well-spoken. He knows what he's doing. He's charismatic as hell. He obviously, like Trump, knows how to work a camera, know how to work a crowd, and get the voters riled up about him. So, as far as I could tell, he was a moderately successful governor of California. Obviously, he was reelected just fine. But that's the only time I've ever voted for a Republican based on actual Republican ideals. Like, he was selling it really good, and he's not a traditional hardcore, right conservative. Like, you listen to him today, he obviously aligns more with the anti-fascist side of the Democratic Party than anybody else. He does not align with the current Republican Party, which is entirely beholden to Trump. The only other time I voted Republican was in 2016, where I lived in Washington State, knew my vote wouldn't matter, and was like, you know what, I don't want Hillary to have a mandate, so screw you, I'm voting Trump. Had absolutely nothing to do with ideology or anything. That was a protest vote. And had I known that he would have won, or was going to win, I don't know. All I know is that in Washington State, my vote meant nothing because it was very solidly blue, which means, yeah, your vote doesn't matter. That's why I hate the Electoral College. But anyway, those are the only 2 times in my entire life I voted Republican. And the only reason I even started down the road of Republicanism was because I was 18 years old and didn't know what the hell was going on. And then, I think I can speak for most men in this case, is that until you're about 25, you really don't know who you are. Like, you don't know who you are as a human being. You don't know who you are as a male. I just know that 18 to 25 was a very confusing time for me. I didn't really get who I was or anything about it. So the idea that, maybe 18 to 25 shouldn't vote. Maybe you should have to be 25 years old to vote. It isn't, something that I consider a poison pill. It's not something that I'm like, oh no, that's a terrible idea. I think back to when I was that age, and I'm like, it wouldn't have been the worst thing in the world. It really wouldn't have. Now, we can have the discussion, like I usually do. I think it's ridiculous that you can sign up for the military at the age of 17 with parental permission to go get shot and also kill people in the name of your country, yet you can't, drink alcohol or buy marijuana if you're in a state that has it legalized. Like, I think that's ridiculous, honestly. I think there should be a carve out. There used to be before Reagan. That was one thing. Way back in the day, it used to be that military bases, if you went to the base club, they would serve alcohol to 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, on base, right? And then Reagan came in and he did away with that, and that was the first thing I heard. I was like, why is the military pro-Reagan then? This is crazy. And we can get into that discussion about whether or not there should be carve-outs for who's allowed to vote or not. But just the idea alone, maybe we shouldn't let people vote until they're 25, is not something I consider crazy. What I do think is after a certain age, you shouldn't be voting anymore. I really don't think that. It's not ageism. I'm not worried about dementia. I'm not worried about crazy people. I just know the way the human brain works. And the way the human brain works is over time, you delete bad memories. And your brain goes ahead and it emphasizes good ones. This is why nostalgia always hits hard. This is why everybody, without critical thinking, you think back and you're like, oh man, it used to be so much easier. It didn't really. It really didn't. The good old days weren't always good. The problem is that your brain, as a self-defense mechanism against being just destructive, deletes those bad memories, or it softens them. It makes things a little cloudy, a little harder. Now you can critically think. I mean, if you actually sit down, pen and paper, and you think about, okay, what were the 80s really like, and you really thought about it, you can overcome that. But just a general thought about the good old days, and it happens. And maybe you've done that, where you had a TV show you watched as a kid and you were like, man, this was great. I love this. And now all of a sudden it's on Netflix, it's streaming, and you're like, hell yeah, I'm going to watch that. And now you watch it and you're like, wow, this is hot garbage. I don't know what I was thinking as a kid, It's that effect, but it also happens. And this is how you get old guys sitting there going, it was better during Reagan or the 60s or 70s. And it's like, you really don't remember the civil rights era at all. You don't remember Watergate at all. Like all that stuff has been, lessened to a degree. It makes you, fond for those times. And again, it's also colored by your own experiences. If you were a straight white male in the 60s and 70s, you probably had it a heck of a lot easier than anyone else in the United States. So, that can also color things. But when you are older, that happens, and it's extremely strong. And my problem is it's very easy for charlatan assholes to take advantage of that. You've got it now where they're like, oh, we're going to go ahead and, that's where the whole white supremacy thing starts kicking in, is they go up to these people and they tell them, well, the problem is now you have all these minorities in the country. And you have all these older white people who are like, yes, there are a lot more brown people than there used to be. And that's why things are different and weird and confusing. And that's what happens when you get old. You get confused by things. I mean, I'm only 42 and I get confused by new slang and new technology. This is, I'm using a webcam right now. It's not going up. I'm going to start probably next week. But I'm testing. I'm using it now. And even this is a pain in the butt because it's something new to me. And it's not something I do all the time. And, I do have that problem with voters because it is so easy to take advantage of the nostalgia of the good old days and to manipulate older voters. It just is. It's not ageist. It's a fact. Are there people that are better at it than others? Yes. But my line of thinking tends to be, okay, 25, you kind of know who you are. You kind of know what you believe in, and you have a little tiny bit of experience in the world to back up your beliefs. Okay, fine. You should be able to vote. 65. I say 65 is a good cutoff because that's typically retirement age. Okay? You're no longer in the workforce. You know, I don't need somebody who's not in the workforce voting on unions. Get the fuck out of here. It no longer involves you. You are no longer in the workforce. Theoretically, you should, in a perfect system, be retired and not have to worry about these things. And that's great. It really is. But I don't think you should have that vote into your 80s and 90s. I'm sorry. You're just no longer connected. As we get older, we tend to become more isolated. And again, with the internet and everything else, it's like, why do you think the elder generations right now are having such a problem voting for fascists? And it's because, you know, they're isolated, they're alone, they're watching TV. Their only communication with the world outside is Fox News. You know, it's one of those things. Now, in the future, it's not going to be Fox News. It'll probably be some website that we're all on right now, and it'll be my generation will be hooked into something now. My generation's a little more like anti-cable TV, so we probably won't get hooked on that, but we're going to get hooked on something. And it's going to color our decisions and how we vote. And that's something that we just can't fall into. So, I mean, me personally, I think you should be removed from it fairly. Now, there was a friend of mine online who made the point, you know, there has to be, maybe there should be a committee, you know, for elected officials that, you know, if 6 people vote that this person has an issue, then they should have to go be evaluated. And if they fail the evaluation, then they're out. I do mention, you know, I have a problem with that basically because that is extremely subjective. I could easily see somebody, I mean, imagine Mitch McConnell, all of a sudden there's this huge spending bill coming up and he's not happy about it. So what's the best way to gum up the works? Get 6 or 5 of his senator friends who he controls because he is the Senate leader for the Republican Party. And he can go ahead and get 5 of his friends to go ahead and vote that, hey, the Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, isn't, all his dogs aren't barking. He needs to go be evaluated. So I could see it being weaponized and abused very easily. So I don't think a subjective test is that way. And then, of course, we don't know who's actually doing this test. You know, who's conducting the test? Is the test fair? Is it a test that is simple? Is, you know, there's so many different questions here. I mean, I used to think that the White House physician was somebody with integrity that you could count on, but then the Orange God King went ahead and turned a White House physician military officer into a #1 MAGA conspiracy lunatic. So these people aren't exactly unbiased either. And again, you know, if it's set up in just the right way, if you find out, oh, the person who's going to run these tests happens to be a Republican who agrees with Mitch McConnell, I mean, I could just see it being weaponized too much, which is why I think a hard and fast rule, hey, maybe voting ends at 65, but representation ends at 70. You're 70 years old, you're done. You know, not saying you can't run at 68. You can run at 68, but just know in 2 years, when you turn 70, you're out of here. You know, and whoever your governor is or however it works out, that's it. It's got to be hard and fast. That way it can be planned for. It's not subjective. It's a hard number, and nobody can abuse the system and try to gum up the works, you know, with an election coming down. But I do think that the Senate and the House need to do this. Again, also another problem is that as you get older, this is just human nature. As you get older, you get more and more stuck in your ways. It becomes harder and harder to find new ways to deal with things. I mean, look at Biden. Okay, Biden is faced with massive division in the country, and climate change are probably his 2 biggest issues outside of foreign policy. He hasn't done anything to address division because he's too old, I think, to understand how the internet works. I don't think he gets social media. I think he understands people post there, and that's a good way for politicians to communicate. But outside of that, I don't think he really understands. Look no further than any of the Senate hearings where Feinstein, Lindsey Graham, or Ted Cruz even are asking Mark Zuckerberg why their numbers are down and why they don't have as many views as they do. Okay? I mean, if you watch any of those tech bro hearings that they have, the full display of how incompetent the elder senators are at the internet is is just palpable. It's there. It's awful. And because of that, I don't think that they can legislate for the problem right now. I think you need younger people in charge, not just staffers. Okay, some people will say, oh, well, you just need younger people advising the president. Well, that doesn't always work because there is that age bias, and it goes both ways. Young people look at old people and are like, you're stuck in your ways. And old people look at young people and are like, you whippersnappers, you just don't understand. This is just how it is. So I don't believe in the get the president young advisors. Also, who enforces that? I don't think that works either. But when it comes to new problems, you need younger minds to be able to find a way around that. It's such a weird thing because a lot of people are going to accuse me of being ageist or that I'm anti-old elders. I'm not. In a perfect world, everybody over 65 would be fully retired and not have to worry about food, clothing, shelter, or anything else. I'm fully on board with that. And honestly, they would be so comfortable that voting wouldn't even need to happen. They would just be like, yeah, whatever, the next generation has this. And I'm not against them working in the workforce past that if they really want to, not because they need to. If you're over 65 and you feel like, hey, all my dogs are barking and I have something to contribute and I want to, and it's not, I have to work because if I don't, I won't eat. Sure, I'm okay with that. I'm not saying let's kick these people out of the workforce. I'm saying, when it comes to my elected officials who are actually writing up legislation, I don't think anybody past the age of 70 should have anything the fuck to do with it. I really don't. They're just too disconnected from the people that are coming up right now and too disconnected from the problem. They can't think past their own biases past a certain age. And it's going to happen to me. It's going to happen to all of us. We're going to get to a certain point and we're not going to be able to push further any more than we want to. That sucks. It's going to happen to us. And, maybe at that point, hopefully somebody close to me is going to be like, hey, Kyle, you're losing a few miles off your fastball. You need to not do a podcast or stop doing politics on social media because you're making a fool of yourself or you're showing your age. I hope one day in the future, be great. But right now, I think that would be my solution, honestly. I would call Vivek's bluff and be like, sure, you want a lower age limit? I want an upper limit on voting. I think we do that. It's the same thing I've been saying for years when it comes to abortion. If they're really serious and they're like, we want to ban abortion, I think Democrats should be like, okay, cool, but we're also banning the death penalty. Pro-life, right? I mean, you want one, let's do the other. Let's do this. You guys are always talking about the young. We're talking about the elderly. Let's meet halfway and just end all killing. How about that? And call their bluff and be like, let's see how serious you guys are about what it says in the Bible about taking a life. Because you guys are really flexible when it comes to a flawed judicial system that kills the wrong people all the time. But you're really rigid when it comes to infants and fetuses that aren't even human beings or anything like it yet. Same thing with that. I think we call Vivek on his bluff. We're like, sure, you wanna go ahead and shut down voting for everybody under the age of 25? Okay, cool. But after you turn 65, you can't vote anymore. And then also when it comes to elected office, once you turn 70, you have to retire. Forced retirement for elected office, for legislators, for the president even. They don't have to be president, The president could stay on. He could be chief of staff. He could work in the White House. I'm saying he can't be an elected official. That would solve a lot of our problems right now. I mean, think about who would be eliminated from running for president next time. Oh, yeah, that's right. It's the two people nobody wants to run for president right now. Joe Biden and Donald Trump would be blanketed, kicked out immediately. Nope, can't run. You're over 70. Tough, And we can have arguments about that age. I just think 70 is it's a good number. Doesn't have to be 70. We can talk. We can discuss this like human beings. And this is just an idea I'm throwing out. And obviously, I know not everybody's with me on this, but I'm sorry. After 2016, the entire idea of every single person has the right to vote really just rings not so true to me. After 2016 and even 2020, when over 80 million people voted for Donald Trump, And again, 2016, I'll give you a pass. You didn't know what was going to happen. Maybe you didn't think he was going to win. Hi, that was me. Whatever. But 2020, you knew damn well what you were voting for. I mean, this was the guy that almost started nuclear war with North Korea for kicks, because he was bored, because he was constipated that day and had a phone on him, and who the hell knows. But we almost had several international incidents because he couldn't control himself. That's a problem. And yet a lot of people still voted for that. I'm sorry, but if you want to argue to me that everybody's vote matters, I disagree. Obviously, somebody needs to be fixed. Somebody's vote doesn't matter. I'm willing to throw them under the bus because I think they're idiots. I'm sure they'd do the same to me. But I don't think you can, with a straight face, say that everyone should vote. I just don't. It doesn't ring true to me. And maybe that's just me, but look, I'm not going to push that on anybody. That's not part of my agenda. That's certainly not the agenda of anybody I know. This is me if I had a magic wand and could control the world, right? I would make some changes. But of course, in my magic world, it would be entirely fair, and there would be a system, and no one would ever abuse it. I mean, that's kind of the problem with my wish list. My wish list is ripe for abuse if the wrong people get in, because every system requires human beings to run it and administrate it fairly, and that's just not possible. So even I acknowledge my system is totally messed up and would only work in a perfect utopia. But barring that, my system would be ripe for abuse. It would be. It's just something I think every now and then, and it's something that right now seems to fit because I'm like, man, I mean, if Mitch McConnell were freezing up behind the scenes and nobody was seeing it, see, this is my real concern, is that he's frozen twice now when the cameras were running. That's really bad luck. So either this is it just is so coincidental that he just happens to have only frozen twice in his entire life, and those two times both happen to coincide when the cameras were rolling. Or he's doing this all the time behind the scenes. This is a regular occurrence. This is a frequent thing. Hopefully he's alone in his office and the moment can just pass. Or maybe he has a staff that is there and ready to take care of him. But I just find it very suspect that somebody like him just happens to only have this happen when the cameras are rolling. And I find that hard to believe. I do. This is happening at the dinner table. This is happening, when he's talking to his friends in the hallway. This is happening a lot more than we're seeing. There's just no way you can convince me that the only two times it's ever happened to be while he was about to give remarks in front of journalists on the Hill, or wherever the thing was last night. I think it was in Kentucky at some kind of fundraising event or whatever. It's serious. And in case you didn't know, when there's an emergency that the president has to deal with, there's the Gang of 8, or sometimes the Gang of 6. It really just depends. But basically, the Senate Majority Leader, Minority Leader, and then House Majority Leader and Minority Leader. So that's those four. And then usually, I think the whips, somebody. But anyway, there's a group of congressional leadership that is called up whenever the president has an emergency that he either needs to just inform them per, or wants their advice on. There are certain rules depending on the situation. And I could just imagine a situation where, you've got the 6 most powerful people in the country in the Oval Office with the president, and the president's just like, okay, and Mitch, what do you think? Because that could happen. That might have already happened. And if it's an emergency, I don't want that. I need my leadership to, whether I agree with them or not. And I think everybody who's ever been in the military will tell you, bad leaders aren't necessarily bad because they make bad decisions. The bad leaders, the worst leaders you could ever have, are the ones that don't make any decisions. And that's essentially what we're volunteering here now when you have Mitch McConnell, who, like him or hate him, is a leader within the Senate. And there may come a time when someone asks him a question that is extremely important and we need his input, and we need a decision now, and he's not going to be able to give an answer. Not even a bad one. That is a serious problem that the United States needs to address, and I think the sooner the better. You can go ahead and blame the voters all you want. Thanks to gerrymandering and campaign finances and everything else, I think you can only blame them so much. And especially, like, Mitch McConnell's never done this before. Yeah, we knew he was getting older, but he was never freezing. Like, if he was doing this last term and then the voters of Kentucky still voted him, I could look at the voters of Kentucky and be like, man, you guys are idiots. You keep electing this guy who, like, freezes at key moments. Hypothetically, if this guy makes it to 2026 and gets reelected along those same lines, I'm like, I'm sorry. First off, I would blame the Democrats and just be like, how are you failing? All you have to do is, compile the same thing I compiled at the beginning of this episode. Just compile all the video of him just standing there, staring off into space while people are asking him questions. Like, that's your ad. It doesn't even need to be an attack ad. I would just play that. I wouldn't even have sound over it or words or anything. I would just play his silence on a loop as much as possible. And I don't see how a Democrat could lose to him in 2026 with that. Especially considering Kentucky does have a blue governor. It does have a Democratic governor. So the idea of a statewide office going to a Democrat in Kentucky isn't impossible. So, yeah, if they elected him knowing full well, it's like, okay, Kentucky voters, you guys are idiots. And trust me, I am the first to lay blame on the voter because I tend to think voters are stupid. But in this case, they didn't know what was going on. If this has been going on, it's been happening behind closed doors and nobody talked about it. He runs a tight ship. But now it's out in the open and it's something we got to deal with. So anyway, that's my take on the gerontocracy of the United States and how we'll fix it. As I said, I'm trying something new here. You guys aren't going to see it, but I am recording video right now, and we are going to be up and running on YouTube. Hopefully next Monday. I'm going to, have another test run tomorrow with the next episode. No idea what I'll talk about. We'll see what the news has in store for that. Probably a hurricane. If you happen to know anybody in the path of the hurricane, please tell them, don't be brave. Get the hell out of there. Don't trust the United States government to come save you. Sometimes they're slow through no fault of their own. Sometimes the best they can do is not come get you. That shit happens. And I just wouldn't want to put my life in the hands of someone else. Especially when you got Ron DeSantis, who is running for president and I think is treating the hurricane secondarily. Really just I would not trust the government. I'd get the hell out of there. As far as you can. I understand it's tough. Hotel rooms are expensive and you're probably not going to be able to find one for a couple 100 miles. Like, I do get it, but if you got to hunker down, like, please be safe. Don't be a hero. Don't try to do anything crazy. Don't trust a river that used to be a street and try to drive over it. You're just asking for it. Don't be brave. Don't be dumb. If you can't get out of there, try to be as safe as you possibly can. And if you are outside of the affected area and you have a few dollars laying around, I know that there are a few organizations. Do your research on them as to which ones you can actually donate to and trust that the money's going to go to the right places. Other than that, stay safe. Try to stay cool during the heat wave. I think my high today is in the 80s, which is going to actually be comfortable for once. So anyway, we'll see you guys again tomorrow. Have a great day. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. If you want to support the show, the best thing you can do is to like, subscribe, share, and leave a review. You can always email me directly at recoveryfrompolitics@gmail.com. I can also be found on Facebook, Threads, and most social media sites except the site formerly known as Twitter. That's a Nazi site, and you will not see me on it anymore. Your support is crucial as this show is not monetized. It is a one-man show using free software on his free time, so your reviews mean a lot. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.